The queen was moved by how the soldier treated her child, and asked him to become her father. The first thing Elia's rook noticed about the alien palace was the silence. It was not an empty silence, but a controlled one, as if sound itself was afraid to exist without permission. The floor beneath his boots shimmered like frozen light, reflecting his shape in fractured angles. Every step he took felt louder than it should have been, even though no echo followed. Elias kept his hands relaxed at his sides. He had been trained to stand straight, to look confident but not aggressive. This was not a battlefield. This was a place of observation, judgment, and ancient power. He was a human soldier, but today he carried no weapon. His uniform was simple, gray and blue, with no medals displayed. The Galactic Council had decided that visible rank symbols might be seen as a threat. Elias did not mind. He had never cared much for symbols anyway. Ahead of him, the Aurelian court waited. They were nothing like humans. Tall, slender beings stood in wide arcs around a raised platform. Their bodies were made of layered crystal and light, shifting slowly in color like deep ocean water. Their faces were smooth and unreadable, with no mouths as humans knew them. Communication, Elias had been told, happened through controlled light pulses and low-frequency thoughts. At the center of the room rose the queen. She was larger than the others, her form brighter, sharper, as if reality itself bent slightly around her presence. Her light was calm but heavy, carrying centuries of rule and responsibility. This was Queen Seralith, ruler of the Aurelian Empire, a civilization older than humanity's written history. Elias stopped at the marked point on the floor and waited. He had been assigned here as part of a diplomatic exchange program. Humans were new to the interstellar stage, and many older species found them confusing. Too emotional, too adaptable, too unpredictable. The Aurelians had requested a human observer, someone to stand quietly, watch, and report. Elias had been chosen because psychological tests showed he reacted calmly to unfamiliar environments and showed unusually high empathy scores. At the time, he had joked that this meant he was good with awkward situations. No one had laughed. A ripple of light moved through the court. The queen acknowledged his presence, though she did not speak aloud. Instead, a soft pressure brushed the edge of Elias' thoughts, not words, but awareness. Human Elias Rook, the meaning conveyed, clear and distant. You are present. Yes, your majesty, Elias said, bowing slightly the way he had been taught. The queen did not respond immediately. Her attention shifted, and Elias felt it before he saw it. From behind the raised platform, a smaller shape emerged. The child. Elias had read the briefing files, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The Aurelian air was young, newly formed, its light softer and less stable than the others. Colors flickered across its surface too quickly, shifting from pale blue to sharp silver, then dimming again. The child hesitated at the edge of the platform. The court stiffened. Elias noticed it immediately. The way the other Aurelians adjusted their posture, increasing the distance between themselves and the child. Their lights became more controlled, more distant. It was not rejection, exactly, but it was not comfort either. The child took another step, then froze. Its light spiked suddenly, flaring bright and uneven. Elias felt a wave of emotion crash through the room, unfiltered and raw. Fear, confusion, overload. The Aurelians reacted as they always did. They did nothing. Protocol demanded stillness. The child was expected to regulate itself. That was how Aurelians learned control. Emotion was something to be mastered, not soothed. The queen watched, her light steady but tense. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen this before, though never like this. New recruits on their first day. Children separated from parents in evacuation shelters. People overwhelmed by too much noise, too many eyes, too much expectation. The child's light flickered violently now, its form wavering. A low harmonic tone filled the chamber, unintentional and unstable. The court grew uneasy. This was not part of the ceremony. Elias did not think, he moved. Gasps of light rippled through the Aurelians as the human stepped forward, crossing a line no one had told him he was not allowed to cross. But everyone had assumed he would not. He walked slowly, carefully, making sure his movements were smooth and non-threatening. When he reached the base of the platform, he stopped and lowered himself to one knee. The action shocked the room. No one knelt to the air unless commanded. Elias ignored the court entirely. His focus was on the child. He did not look directly at it. Instead, he angled his body slightly away, giving space. He softened his shoulders. He slowed his breathing. "It's okay," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to do anything right now." The child's light flickered, confused. Ilias continued, keeping his tone gentle. "Too many people, right? Too much noise. Happens to me too." He raised one hand slowly and placed it flat against his own chest. "See this? That's me breathing, slow, like this." He exaggerated the movement just enough to be clear. In. Out. The chamber was silent. The child's light wavered, then hesitated. Ilias repeated the motion. In, out. A moment passed, then another. Gradually, the wild flickering softened. The sharp flashes dimmed into smoother waves of color. The harmonic tone lowered, becoming steadier. The child took a small step forward. Ilias smiled, though the child may not have understood the expression. "That's good," he said. "You're doing great." The queen watched everything. She had seen countless tutors, scientists, and caretakers attempt to guide the heir. All had relied on technique, discipline, or psychic control. None had ever simply knelt. The child tilted its form, curious now rather than afraid. A tentative emotional signal reached outward, not a demand, not a command, but a question. Ilias felt it brush his mind. Curiosity. Seeking, he did not block it. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Ilias." The child's light shifted to a warm, uncertain gold. A pulse of recognition spread through the room. The queen felt something she had not felt since her own formation cycle, long before she became ruler. Relief. The child moved closer, stopping just a short distance from Ilias. Its light reached out again, carefully this time, touching the edge of his thoughts. Images flickered, colors, shapes, feelings without words. Ilias stayed still. "It's okay," he said again. "I'm not going anywhere." Behind them, the Aurelian court was frozen, their certainty shaken. This was not in any record. This was not how things were done. The queen rose slightly from her platform. "Human Ilias Rook," her presence spoke, stronger now. "Explain your behavior." Ilias did not stand. He did not turn. He answered simply. "Your Majesty," the child was overwhelmed. "Sometimes the fastest way to help is to make yourself smaller, not larger." The queen considered this. She looked at her child, calm now, curious, stable. Then she looked at the human, still kneeling, offering comfort without expectation. For the first time in centuries, the queen questioned a fundamental truth of her people. Perhaps strength was not always control. Perhaps leadership did not begin with command. The child's light brightened gently as it reached out again, closer now, safer. Ilias smiled. The next cycle in the Aurelian palace felt different, though nothing visible had changed. The light still flowed along the walls like slow water. The court still stood in perfect arcs. The queen still ruled from her high platform, yet something unseen had shifted, like a new current moving beneath calm surface. Ilias Rook felt it the moment he entered the chamber again. He walked at the same measured pace, stopped at the same marked place on the floor, and kept his hands relaxed. But this time the silence did not feel cold. It felt watchful. The child was already present. It stood closer to the queen than before, its light calm but alert. When Ilias came into view, the child's colors changed, soft gold mixed with pale blue. It was not fear, it was recognition. Ilias noticed and smiled without thinking. The court noticed too. Small, controlled ripples of light passed between the Aurelians. They did not speak, but Ilias could sense their shared confusion. The child was not supposed to react like this. Not to an outsider, not to a human. The queen observed everything. "Human Ilias Rook," her presence spoke. "You are summoned to remain." Ilias inclined his head. "Yes, your Majesty." Time passed differently in the palace. There were no clocks, no clear divisions. Still, Ilias became aware that this was no longer a brief appearance. He was expected to stay. The child shifted slightly, its light pulsing with contained energy. It took a careful step forward, then stopped, as if waiting for permission. Ilias did not move toward it. He remembered something important from his training, something learned long before the military. When children are uncertain, rushing toward them only makes it worse. Instead, he lowered himself slowly to sit on the smooth floor. This caused another ripple of surprise in the court. Sitting was informal, personal. Ilias rested his arms loosely on his knees and looked at the space in front of him, not directly at the child. He hummed quietly under his breath, a soft, wordless tune his mother used to hum when he was young. He had not realized he remembered it so clearly. The sound carried gently through the chamber. The child tilted its form again, curious. It took another step, then another. The queen felt the child's emotional state stabilize further. The erratic spikes from before were gone. Instead, there was focus, interest, and something new, comfort. The child reached the edge of the platform and paused. A cautious emotional signal reached outward, touching Elia's thoughts lightly. Not fear this time, a question. Elias felt it and responded without words, simply letting calm and patience fill his mind. "Yes," he said softly, "I'm still here." The child moved closer until it stood only a short distance away. Its light shimmered gently, like sunlight through shallow water. The queen lowered her attention, studying the interaction carefully. "Human Elias Rook," she spoke again, "why does the air respond to you?" Elias thought before answering. He chose his words carefully, keeping them simple. "I think," he said, "because I'm not asking anything from them, I'm just here." The queen processed this. Aurelians were raised with purpose from their first moment of awareness. Every interaction carried expectation, performance, growth. The concept of presence without demand was unfamiliar. The child shifted again, then did something no Aurelian heir had ever done before. It sat, not formally, not in a controlled posture. It simply lowered itself and settled near Elias, its light relaxed and open. The court froze. The queen felt a sharp intake of surprise ripple through her consciousness. Sitting beside another without hierarchy was deeply against tradition, yet the child was calm, stable. More regulated than it had been during any formal session. Elias glanced at the child and smiled gently. He did not speak right away. After a moment, he reached down and touched the floor, tracing a simple shape with his finger, a circle, then another. Then a line connecting them. "I used to draw when things felt too big," he said quietly. "Helped me focus." The child watched intently. Its light shifted with interest, following the motion. Tentatively, a thin beam of light extended from the child and traced over the shapes Elias had made, reinforcing them in faint glow. Elias laughed softly, surprised. "Yeah, like that." The sound of human laughter echoed strangely in the chamber, warm and unfamiliar. The queen observed, fascinated and unsettled. She dismissed the rest of the court. The Aurelians withdrew reluctantly, their light dimming as they left. None questioned the command, but many carried uncertainty with them. Soon, only the queen, the child, and the human remained. The space felt larger now, quieter. Elias became aware of the queen's full attention settling on him. It was not threatening, but it was intense. "Human Elias Rook," she spoke, "you interact with the air as if it is equal." Elias looked up at her, careful but honest. "They're a child," he said. "That matters before anything else." The queen considered this deeply. In Aurelian culture, the heir was never referred to as a child. It was a future ruler, a vessel of continuity, a responsibility. But watching now, she saw something she had long trained herself not to see: vulnerability. The child shifted closer to Elias, its light brushing against his arm. Elias stayed still, allowing it. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he murmured, not realizing the queen could hear him. "Nobody can." The child responded with a soft wave of emotion, relief mixed with trust. The queen felt it too. She remembered her own early cycles long ago, when she had learned control before comfort, discipline before safety. There had been no space to simply exist. Perhaps that was why ruling had always felt heavy. "Human Elias Rook," the queen said slowly, "what is your intent?" Elias answered without hesitation. "To help them feel safe." The queen waited, then asked, "And after safety?" Elias thought again. "Then they can learn anything." Silence filled the chamber. The queen had been taught that safety was the result of strength, not its foundation. This human suggested the opposite. The child's light pulsed warmly, pressing closer to Elias' side. Not touching exactly, but near enough to feel connection. The queen felt something shift within her core, an old, rigid structure loosening. She had sought knowledge across stars. She had mastered strategy, diplomacy, and control. Yet here in her own palace, a human soldier without rank or weapon had shown her something new. Care without condition. The queen made a decision. "Human Elias Rook," she spoke, "you will remain as observer and companion to the heir." Elias looked up, surprised. "Your Majesty." "You will teach nothing unless asked," the queen continued. "You will command nothing. You will simply remain." Elias nodded slowly. "I can do that." The child's light flared softly in joy. Days passed. Elias stayed. He learned the palace routines. He sat with the child during quiet cycles. He listened when it sent confused emotional signals. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he stayed silent. He told simple stories, not of war, but of earth, skies, rain, animals, and people who cared for each other. The child absorbed everything eagerly. The queen watched from a distance. She noticed changes. The child's emotional spikes decreased. Its focus improved. Its curiosity expanded. It began asking questions not just about rulership but about others. Why do beings feel sad? Why do they help? Why did you stay? Elias answered each one patiently. Because feelings matter. One cycle, as Elias prepared to leave the chamber, the child reached out and sent a clear emotional signal. Stay. Elias paused, then sat back down. The queen witnessed this. In that moment, she understood something profound. This human had not been chosen. He had been accepted. And for the first time since becoming queen, she wondered if the future of her empire depended not on perfect control, but on learning how to care. The palace light shifted subtly, warmer than before, as if the walls themselves were listening. The change did not announce itself loudly. There were no alarms, no public declarations, no visible signs of rebellion or reform. Yet across the Aurelian palace, careful minds began to notice patterns that did not belong to old records. The air no longer withdrew during learning cycles. Where once the child had struggled to maintain stable focus, now it remained present for longer periods. Emotional surges still came, but they passed more smoothly, like waves instead of storms. Tutors reported progress but could not explain the cause using any known model. They all knew the cause anyway. The human. Elias Rook continued to arrive each cycle at the same time. He wore the same simple uniform, still unarmed, still without decoration. He followed no schedule beyond what the child needed. Sometimes he sat in silence. Sometimes he spoke. Often he listened. The queen allowed this to continue, though not without resistance. Members of the high cognitive circle requested audience after audience. They questioned the wisdom of prolonged exposure. They warned of dependency. They cited ancient doctrine. The queen listened. She did not change her decision. One quiet cycle, the child sat beside Elias near the wide viewing panel that overlooked the stars. Aurelian windows did not show simple space. They filtered radiation into visible patterns, turning the void into slow-moving rivers of color. Elias watched with interest, but the child watched him. "You're thinking," Elias said gently without looking. The child's light pulsed once in agreement. "Want to share?" he asked. The emotional signal that came was tangled, confusion layered with curiosity. Beneath it, something else, concern. Elias waited. He had learned that silence gave the child space to organize thoughts. Finally, a clearer emotion reached him. "Why do you stay?" Elias smiled softly. "Because I chose to." This seemed to trouble the child. Most things in its life were not chosen. They were assigned, designed, expected. "Does that mean," Elias continued, choosing his words carefully, "that I could leave?" The child's light flickered, not in fear, but in realization. "Yes," Elias said, "but I don't want to." That mattered. Later that same cycle, the queen summoned Elias privately. The chamber was smaller than the main court, designed for thought rather than ceremony. Light flowed in calm, steady patterns. The queen stood alone when Elias entered. "Human Elias Rook," she said, "you are altering the heir's development." Elias did not deny it. "Yes, your majesty. Is this your intent?" "No," he said honestly. "My intent is to support them. Change just happens." The queen considered this. Aurelians valued intent above outcome. That was how responsibility was measured. Then she asked something unexpected. "What is a father?" Elias looked up, surprised. The queen's presence remained steady, but beneath it there was uncertainty. Elias took his time. "A father," he said slowly, "is someone who stays. Someone who protects not just from danger but from feeling alone. Someone who teaches not because they have to but because they care." The queen processed this. Aurelians did not have parents in the human sense. Genetic lines were precise, controlled. Emotional bonds were minimized to prevent instability, and yet she watched her child grow calmer, wiser, more open because of one human who stayed. "Do fathers rule?" the queen asked. Elias shook his head. "No, they guide." That answer lingered. The next learning cycle was different. Instead of tutors, the queen herself observed as Elias and the child worked together. The task was simple, understanding cause and effect using shifting light patterns. The child struggled at first, frustration rising. Elias noticed immediately. "It's okay to stop," he said. "We can try again later." The child hesitated, then sent a small, uncertain emotion. "If I stop, will you be disappointed?" Elias felt something tighten in his chest. "No," he said firmly. "Never for needing a break." The child relaxed. The queen felt that moment deeply. In Aurelian tradition, disappointment was a tool, pressure refined excellence. But she saw now what it cost. That cycle after Elias left, the queen remained with her child. She did not instruct, she did not correct. She stayed, the child noticed. The following cycles brought quiet tension. Other species had begun to observe Aurelian development metrics. They noticed the heir's unusual emotional stability. Questions were asked. Data was requested. The queen authorized limited release. The results unsettled many. An empire built on control now showed signs of growth through connection. One council member finally spoke what others feared. "This human is becoming more than an observer," the light pattern conveyed. "He is shaping the air." The queen replied calmly, "So is the empire, the difference is intention." Still, pressure grew. Elias sensed it even before it reached him directly. The palace felt tighter. Conversations ended when he approached. The child noticed, too. "They are afraid," the child sent one cycle, emotions clearer than ever. Elias nodded. "Change scares people." "Will they make you leave?" the child asked. Elias did not answer immediately. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but whatever happens, what we've done here matters." That did not comfort the child. The next cycle, the High Cognitive Circle issued a formal review. Elias was summoned. The chamber was full again, light sharp and analytical. Human Elias Rook, a unified presence, spoke, "Explain your continued influence." Elias stood calmly. "I respond to the heir's needs. This is not your role." "Then the role needs changing," Elias replied respectfully but firmly. A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. The queen watched closely. One voice pressed harder. "You are forming emotional dependence." Elias shook his head. "I'm teaching independence through safety." The council did not understand that. The queen did. She rose. The chamber stilled. "This human remains," the queen declared. "Not as observer, not as experiment." The court waited. "As guardian," silence followed. Guardian was an ancient word, rarely used. It implied responsibility without authority, presence without command. Elias looked at the queen, stunned. The child's light surged in relief and joy. Elias knelt not out of protocol, but gratitude. "I won't fail," he said quietly. The queen answered, "You already have not." From that cycle onward, things changed openly. Elias was no longer hidden at the edges. He accompanied the heir during formal appearances, though he never stood above or behind, always beside, slightly back. The child began speaking during councils, asking questions no one expected. "Why do we value efficiency over understanding?" Elias watched with pride, not ownership. One quiet moment, the child sent a clear, warm emotion. "You are family." Elias swallowed hard. He did not respond with words. He placed a hand over his chest and nodded. Across the palace, systems adjusted. Light shifted warmer. Learning models recalibrated. An empire did not change overnight, but it had begun. And at its center stood a human who never sought power, only connection, and a child who was no longer alone. The stars beyond the window seemed brighter somehow, as if even the universe leaned closer, listening to something new being born. The empire did not argue with the queen's decision openly, but disagreement moved quietly through its systems like a slow shadow. Reports were written with careful wording. Data was framed to suggest caution. Traditions were quoted, not challenged, but gently pressed forward as reminders of how things had always been. Elias Rook felt the pressure even when no one spoke to him directly. He was now listed in official records as guardian to the heir. The title carried weight, but no clear definition. Some saw him as a necessary adjustment. Others saw him as a dangerous idea given a name. Elias did his best not to think about it. Most cycles, his focus stayed on the child. The heir had grown, not in size, but in presence. Its light patterns were more stable now, more expressive. It could shape emotion into clearer intent, and its thoughts reached outward with less confusion. One cycle, while they sat together near the star window, the child asked a question that surprised Elias. "Why do they watch us so closely now?" Elias followed the child's gaze. Beyond the palace, observer signals from other systems flickered faintly. Diplomatic interest had grown. The Aurelian Empire did not change often, and when it did, others paid attention. "They're curious," Elias said, "and a little worried." "About me?" the child asked. "About what you might become," Elias replied. The child considered this. "Do you worry?" Elias smiled softly. "I worry about lots of things, but not about you." That answer stayed with the child. Later that cycle, the queen invited Elias to walk with her through the inner gardens. Few were allowed there. The space was filled with slow-growing light structures that responded to thought and emotion, forming shapes that reflected the state of those who passed through. As they walked, the light around the queen remained steady and cool. Around Elias, it warmed slightly. "You have changed this place," the queen said. "I didn't mean to," Elias answered. "I know," she replied. "That is why it matters." They stopped near a pool of softly glowing light. The surface reflected not faces, but emotional states. Elias saw his own reflection, calm, tired, steady. The queen looked into the pool and paused. "When I was formed," she said, "I was alone. That was considered strength." Elias said nothing. "I learned control before comfort, purpose before safety. It made me an effective ruler." Her light dimmed slightly, "But I do not know if it made me whole." Elias felt the weight of her words. "You're learning now," he said gently. "Yes," the queen agreed, "and learning is uncomfortable." That same cycle, a formal request arrived from the Galactic Observation Union. They wished to witness a development session with the Aurelian heir. This was unprecedented. The Union rarely involved itself in internal processes. The Queen agreed. The chamber filled with representatives from species that looked at the Aurelians with a mix of respect and caution. Elias stood beside the child, as always, slightly behind. The session began. The child was asked to demonstrate reasoning patterns, ethical evaluation, and long-term planning. It answered clearly, thoughtfully, often pausing to consider not just outcomes, but impact. Then one observer asked, "What guides your decisions?" The child did not answer immediately. Its light shifted, thoughtful. "I consider how others will feel," the child said, "and whether they will feel alone." A quiet ripple passed through the chamber. "That is inefficient," one observer remarked, not unkindly. The child turned slightly toward Elias, then back. "It is slower," the child agreed, "but it lasts longer." The queen watched the room carefully. No one argued. After the observers left, reactions spread quickly across the empire. Some praised the heir's depth. Others worried that empathy would weaken authority. One council member finally confronted the queen directly. "This path risks instability," the member warned. "The human influence is too strong." The queen replied calmly. "Then perhaps our stability was too fragile." Elias never attended those discussions. He was with the child when the questions grew heavy, when doubt crept in from the edges. One cycle, the child's light dimmed unexpectedly. Elias noticed at once. "What's wrong?" he asked. "They say I am different," the child sent. "You are," Elias agreed. "That's not a bad thing. But they say I will break what exists." Elias took a slow breath. "Change always feels like breaking to people who are comfortable." The child's light wavered. "What if they are right?" Elias did something he had not done before. He spoke about himself. "I grew up in a small place," he said. "People there believed things had to stay the same to be safe. When I chose a different path, some said I was wrong. Some stopped talking to me." The child listened closely. "Was it worth it?" the child asked. Elias smiled, a little sad, a little proud. "Yes." That answer settled deep. The next major shift came quietly. The queen announced a new initiative, the Formation Support Program. Young Aurelians, not just the heir, would receive guided presence during early development. Not control, not correction, presence. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some elders protested, others withdrew, but many younger Aurelians responded with cautious hope. Elias was asked to help design the program. He refused. "I'm not an expert," he said. "I just show up." The queen understood. Instead, she asked him to train others, not to be human, but to practice patience, listening, and emotional safety. Elias agreed to that. He spoke simply. He demonstrated more than he explained. He showed how to sit without demanding attention, how to wait without pressure, how to respond instead of react. Many struggled. A few learned. The child watched all of this, absorbing more than anyone realized. One cycle, the child asked the queen directly, "Why did you choose him?" The queen looked at Elias, then back at her child. "Because he knelt when no one else would," she said, "and because he stayed." The child considered that. Later, alone with Elias, the child sent a quiet, careful thought. "Will you always stay?" Elias did not answer immediately. "I will stay as long as I can," he said, "and if one day I cannot, what I've given you will still be yours." The child's light brightened, steady and strong. "I think," the child said, "that is what a father is." Elias felt his throat tighten. Across the empire, changes continued to ripple outward. Diplomatic messages shifted in tone. Other species requested cultural exchanges, not for technology but for understanding. Humanity's name appeared more often in discussions, not as a military power but as a source of something rare: care. The queen watched it all with measured attention. She did not regret her choice. One evening cycle, as the palace lights dimmed into rest patterns, the queen stood alone at the high window. She looked out at the stars that had once felt distant and cold. Now they felt closer. Behind her, she sensed the presence of her child and the human guardian standing together, quietly, comfortably, without hierarchy. The future of the empire was not written in control alone anymore. It was being shaped by connection. Time moved forward, not in sudden leaps, but in steady steps that felt gentle and real. The Aurelian Empire did not transform overnight, and neither did its people. But something deep had changed, something that could not be undone because it had grown roots. Elia's rook noticed it in small moments. Young Aurelians no longer avoided the air. They approached carefully, unsure but curious. Some watched from a distance. Others sat nearby, copying the way Elias stayed quiet and open. No one ordered them to do this. It simply felt right. The air noticed too. "They are not afraid anymore," the child said one cycle, their thoughts clear and calm. "They're learning," Elias replied. "Just like you did." The child's light warmed at that. As the air grew, their presence became steady and strong, not sharp or overwhelming. When they entered a chamber, the space did not tighten. It relaxed. Conversations flowed more easily. Questions were asked more freely. This did not go unnoticed. Other empires began sending observers, not to judge but to understand. They had seen powerful rulers before. They had never seen one who listened the way the Aurelian heir did. During a multi-empire gathering, the heir was asked a direct question. "What is the foundation of your rule?" The chamber was full. Elias stood behind and slightly to the side as always. He said nothing. The heir paused, then answered. "Safety," they said, "because from safety, choice is possible." Some delegates exchanged uncertain signals. Others leaned forward, interested. "And who taught you this?" another asked. The heir turned slightly, their light brushing Elias' presence without touching. "I was shown," they replied, "by someone who stayed." That was enough. Humanity's role in the wider galaxy shifted after that gathering. Not through force, not through demands, but through quiet respect. Humans were invited to advise on education, mediation, and first contact efforts. They were not seen as perfect, but as honest. Elias remained where he was. The queen grew older, though age for an Aurelian was not the same as for a human. Still, she felt the weight of time more clearly now, perhaps because she allowed herself to feel it all. One cycle, she asked Elias to join her alone. "You have given my child something I never could," she said. Elias shook his head. "You gave them space for it to grow." The queen considered this. "My people will remember you," she said, "not as a symbol, as a turning point." Elias smiled faintly. "I was just being human." "That," the queen replied, "is the remarkable part." The heir's formal ascension came later, without spectacle. There were no overwhelming displays of power, no rigid declarations. Instead, there was a gathering focused on shared intent. When the heir spoke, their voice carried calm certainty. "I will not rule alone," they said. "I will rule with understanding." The empire accepted this, not because it was ordered to, but because it had already begun living that truth. After the ascension, life did not suddenly become easier. There were disagreements, mistakes, moments of doubt, and through it all, Elias stayed. He was older now. Lines marked his face. His movements were slower, but his presence was as steady as ever. One quiet cycle, the heir joined him by the star window where they had once sat as a child. "You are tired," the heir observed. Elias chuckled softly. "A little." "You could leave," the heir said gently. "You have given enough." Elias looked out at the stars, then back at the one he had watched grow. "I know," he said, "but I'm still here." The heir nodded. "Then so am I in time." Elias did leave the palace, not in exile, not in dismissal, but in rest. His body had reached its limit. The queen ensured he was honored, not with monuments, but with truth. When Elias passed, the palace lights dimmed softly across the empire. The heir did not withdraw. They stood before their people and spoke plainly. "He taught us that strength does not come from standing above others," they said. "It comes from standing with them." Across the stars, the story spread. Not of a soldier who became powerful, but of a human who knelt, stayed, and cared. And because of that, an empire learned how to raise its future. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy, it helped it grow.